Welcome to the deep dive. We got a lot of messages asking about how RC car competitions really took off, how they went from this almost underground thing to the big organized events we see today.
Yeah, it's a great question.
So we've been digging through some old race reports, enthusiast accounts, things like that you sent in. And well, it's clear it's a story of pure passion, really.
Mm.
Taking some pretty basic gear and turning it into these high-performance machines, eventually on a global stage.
It really is. It's a heck of a ride looking back.
When you look at the sources, it's kind of striking how much it just boils down to a bunch of really dedicated folks back then, just wanting to see who could build faster, who could drive better.
Exactly. That core desire, to compete, to tinker, to innovate it was there right from the start, just maybe on a smaller scale.
With maybe slightly less refined tech.
Yeah, you could say that. Definitely less refined.
Okay, so let's dive into the very beginning. The sources paint this picture of the 1970s where, look, if you wanted an RC car, you weren't just grabbing one off the shelf at a department store.
Not at all. These were hobby shop finds, mostly.
Yeah.
And usually kits, right? You had to put them together yourself.
Right, you had to be invested. It wasn't just plug and play. We're talking like hand soldering wires, maybe even making your own servos, those little motors for steering and throttle.
Absolutely. And the radios. Big, bulky AM units, not like the sleek 2.4 gigahertz stuff we have now.
So the barrier to entry was higher, which probably meant the people involved were really, really into it.
Totally committed. It was a hands-on thing. And, like the sources point out, Southern California was ground zero, Orange County, the San Fernando Valley, that whole area.
Which makes sense, doesn't it, given the car culture there already?
Yeah, and you had a lot of engineering types around, aerospace industry and all that. It was kind of the perfect storm.
So where did these early folks actually, race these things? One of the documents mentioned makeshift tracks popping up around 1973, parking lots, empty tennis courts.
You got it. Talk about making do. They saw an open slab of asphalt and thought, yep, that's a track.
Uh-huh. Amazing.
But you got to understand, the cars themselves were, well, pretty basic by today's standards. Kind of slow, heavy.
And the radio issue you mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Those AM radios were notorious for interference. Imagine trying to make a turn and suddenly your car's picking up some trucker's CB radio chatter.
Oh, man, that sounds infuriating. I can just picture it.
It really shows how raw it all was back then. Unpredictable.
Okay, so you've got these informal meetups in parking lots. How do we get from that to actual, organized racing? It seems like a big leap.
Well, it's kind of a natural progression, isn't it? You get a bunch of passionate people together, all pushing the limits. The competitive spirit just takes over.
More people join in, skills get better.
Exactly. And the desire to see who's really the best just grows. And that, according to the sources, led to the first proper RC car racing clubs forming around, 1974?
And that's where RAR comes in, remotely operated auto racers. That sounds like a really key moment, bringing some structure to the glorious chaos.
Glorious chaos is a good way to put it. But yeah, ROAR was crucial. They provided that framework, rules, classes, just a sense of legitimacy. It helped formalize things.
You have a direction.
Right. And as the competition got more serious, so did the tracks. You see that evolution in the documents from just flat surfaces to purpose-built dirt tracks, high-grip carpet for indoors, smooth asphalt circuits.
Each needing different setups, different driving styles.
Totally. And then things really went up a notch. Your material mentions 1977, the IFR World Championships. That sounds like the moment it went from local fun to something bigger.
Yeah, truly global.
Right. A huge turning point. FAir setting international standards. That elevated the whole scene almost overnight.
Suddenly, winning your local club race could maybe lead somewhere bigger.
Precisely. It spurred even more innovation, pushed the performance levels way up, cars got faster, tuning got sharper, and the stakes, well, maybe not huge money yet, but definitely bragging rights and recognition.
Okay, now this next part in the sources sounds a little wild, talking about early safety. Or maybe the lack of it.
Uh-huh.
Nitro cars hitting maybe 40 miles per hour, and the track barriers were just duct tape. Seriously.
Yeah, it was definitely a period where enthusiasm maybe got a bit ahead of safety sense. These were quick little machines even back then.
And the accounts mention injuries weren't exactly rare, not just to the cars.
No, spectators sometimes got caught out too. Stories of people getting ankles clipped by a car that went off course or expensive cameras getting smashed. It sounds pretty freewheeling.
Almost dangerous, yeah.
And the fire risks too. Leaking nitro fuel, batteries back then could overheat pretty spectacularly unregulated electronics.
The pit areas must have been tense sometimes.
Yikes. Okay, so obviously that couldn't last forever.
Right. And that's where, as the sources detail, local authorities started getting involved. Cities, counties.
The research specifically mentions California and Texas as being early movers on that front, saying, okay, hang on, we need some actual rules here. Exactly. The need for event permits started popping up. Minimum track safety standards, things like proper fences around the lanes, fire extinguishers being mandatory,
Yeah.
having trained race marshals.
That sounds like a big step towards professionalization.
It absolutely was. It wasn't just a casual get-together anymore. There was a recognized need for safety protocols, official oversight, a necessary evolution, really.
Okay, so those wild early days were maybe chaotic, but part of growing up. Now let's talk about how the competition itself really drove innovation. The sources make a big deal about how tournaments weren't just about winning.
Right, they were about pushing the technology. They became these intense proving grounds.
Everyone looking for that edge, right? That little tweak to get faster.
Constantly. Drivers, builders, always searching for that advantage. And it's amazing how quickly the tech evolved because of that direct pressure.
Leading to things like layered chassis, more powerful motors, electric and nitro.
Better suspension that actually, suspended things properly.
Yeah.
And precise steering, that was always a big one.
It sounds like every race was practically an R&D session out in the open.
Pretty much. A relentless cycle of trying something new, seeing if it worked on track, then improving it for the next race. And then, as your sources highlight, you had the big companies getting seriously involved in the early 80s. Tamiya, Kyosho, Associated Electrics.
That's where that arms race term comes in, isn't it?
It's a perfect description. Each one trying to outdo the others, constantly releasing new designs, new tech.
And Associated Electric's RC-10 gets a special mention launched in '84, described as truly revolutionary. What was the big deal there?
The RC-10 really was a game changer. It wasn't just adapting something else. It was designed purely for high-level racing right from the start.
Purpose-built.
Exactly. Innovative lightweight chassis, advanced suspension. It just set a completely new standard for performance and handling. It dominated racing almost immediately.
Wow. So it really shifted things towards more serious, performance-focused cars.
Definitely. It redefined what a top-tier race buggy was.
So these tournaments became showcases. You could literally see advancements in things like aerodynamics even on that small scale, or people fiddling with gear ratios, messing with early battery chemistry.
All being tested under race conditions.
And what worked on the track often quickly made its way into the kits people could buy, right?
That's the beauty of it. That fantastic link between competition driving development and that development benefiting the whole hobby.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit to the late 1980s. It sounds like RC racing had truly gone global by then.
Oh yeah, the transformation was pretty much complete, as the research shows. It went from being pretty localized to a genuinely global thing.
You start seeing international teams, proper sponsorships.
Full event calendars spanning different countries. It really had become a legitimate form of motorsport, just on a smaller scale.
With its own media, those magazines we all used to pore over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And dedicated fan bases. Plus, you had factory-backed drivers, emerging guys, whose job it was to race and develop these cars. That signaled a whole new level of seriousness.
It had all the pieces of a real motorsport.
It did.
Yeah.
But what's cool, and what the sources point out, is that even with all that professionalism creeping in, that community vibe from the early days never totally went away.
It wasn't just the elite racers.
No, it still had this amazing mix. Kids starting out, engineers applying their know-how, lifelong hobbyists just loving the scene and the challenge.
It sounds like that unique blend, the racing, the science, the sort of subculture around it, that's what really defined those formative years.
I think so. It was this amazing intersection of technical skill, the basic human drive to compete, and just this shared, almost obsessive passion for these little machines.
So yeah, the next time you see an RC car buzzing around a park or a track, it's worth remembering there's this whole rich history behind it. A direct line back to those pioneers in the '70s with their soldering irons and big dreams.
Absolutely. It's pretty incredible how a hobby that started so small evolved into its own significant part of motorsport history.
And it keeps evolving, doesn't it? Still blending technology and competition.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what's the next big leap going to be, building on everything that came before?
That's the exciting part. It's a story that's definitely not over.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the origins of RC car competitions. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing your curiosity that sent us down this track.